Starting recording. Okay, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I am, and I am also the law.
Indeed. I think, yes. I think we're going to be forming some real judgments on things today and passing the laws. As you may have guessed, well, no, you probably haven't guessed, actually, just from that. Today's film we're going to be recording is going to be the 2012 Dredd. Just to reassure people, if they did think we're not going to be touching on this, well, we will be touching on, but we're not discussing the 1995 Stallone one. Maybe one day when the well has run dry, but but right now we're going to be talking the 2012 Dredd. Just to give some details about it. Say, directed by Peter Travis, written by Alex Garland, who created and wrote and directed, I think, several Ex Machina, Annihilation, some other pretty good films, starring Carl Urban as Dredd, Olivia Thirlby as Judge Anderson, Lena Headey as Mama, Wood Harris as Kay. And I'll give a very, very brief synopsis because that's really all that there is. Cadet Anderson is on assessment as a cadet by Judge Dredd. She is taken on a drug gang bust into the Peach Trees mega block. And from there, the two judges have to survive. That's pretty much it. It's a really sort of slim story. But before we get into it, what was really like your introduction to both Judge Dredd and then the film as well, Dredd? Because obviously Judge Dredd being an English or British comic strip. So what was your introduction to Dredd?
Well, thinking about this film, I have realized how much I grew up on Judge Dredd, that I don't really remember my first exposure to it. As a kid, I was certainly after, say, about 10, something like that. But from there onward, I just bought every single European, Japanese, foreign edition graphic novel I ever could. And so Judge Dredd was something that existed in collections. It existed in, random issues of 2000 AD I could get in the back of some old comic shop. And everywhere that I travel across the country, anywhere I go, I'd go to a comic shop. And if they had, another edition of something from 2000 AD, I'd get, Devil and Wow. And I have no idea how we fit into everything. But I'd read it and I'd just be exposed to these random stories. So I sort of grew up with Dredd. And I remember when the first Dredd movie came out, wanting it to be a hit and sort of having a reaction to it. And, thinking, basically at that time, I thought, well, it's the 90s. This is good enough. I mean, this is okay. Maybe this gets some people to read it and they realize that the comic is better, right? I mean, that was the case of a lot of those early comic book movies. So, but obviously it was hated and reviled over time. So when I knew that they were doing a new one, I knew I wanted it to be a hit, and I went to see it and just adored it. And it meant the world to me, and it still does. I still love it. So what about you? What's your Dredd history?
Yeah, well, first I agree. I adore this film, and I have similar feelings towards the '95 film, which we will be touching on. But mine is sort of it's almost like quintessentially British for certain kids, like comic book kids, of sort of I came up on sort of like the Beano and Dandy and those sort of like kiddie comedy comics initially, and then as I got older, sort of like you start to pick up things. I was aware of the American comics. Everyone's always aware of Batman and all that sort of Superman. But I remember I went on a day trip one summer holiday. I was given some money, sent to the newsagents, and go pick up a comic because you're going on a bus trip to somewhere and you're going to want something to read. So sent to the newsagent, scanning through the usual fare, and then there was this cover, and it had Dredd sort of like just bursting through the cover on his Lawmaster, the big motorbike that they have. And inside it was several chapters of the Cursed Earth saga, sort of the first proper mega epic that they did for 2000 AD. Quite early on, it was a reprint, so there was a thing called the Complete Judge Dredd. Before they became the Complete Case Files, which is the big omnibus editions they do, it was these monthly comics. And I just read that over and over again and loved it. And after that, I went back to the newsagent and I was like, what is this? Where's more of this? And I was shown 2000 AD. And so, yeah, I must have been this must have been like 88, 89. Well, yeah, around 89-ish. And so, yeah, I was like, this is amazing. And so I was introduced to 2000 AD. And all the characters went with it. And Dredd is obviously the main. It's their primary character. He's in every issue, other than the very, very first issue.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It's introduction to... And one day I think maybe we'll have to do a 2000 AD sort of, dive into for some of the other characters that are worth noting. But anyway, that was it. And that was it. Now, for years after that, I got 2000 AD Weekly, the Judge Dredd magazine that started in like 92. And so when the film came out in 95, I was beyond excited. Like, it was all being hyped in the 2000 AD and all this other stuff, and they were going to release an additional comic. And so, yeah, I snuck in. I was slightly underage because it was a 15 over here. And we got in to see it. And I remember sort of the first 10 minutes being like, this is awesome. It's sort of ridiculous. It's got the right feel. And then he takes the helmet off and you're like, this is crap. And that's it. So when this was made and when this was coming out, I was nervous. I will admit that, you're nervous because you do get to a point. And I think, we've said it about other properties that you sort of go, how can they do this any way that you're going to feel is authentic to the source material? Is it going to feel right? Is it going to feel cheap? Because I also knew that when this was being made that they had budget restraints. So I was like, oh, is it going to feel cheap? Is it going to be a bit crap? And then I saw the trailer and I was like, nope, I'm in. That's good. I'm going to go see this. And yeah, as yourself, I adored it, and I went to the cinema and I was just blown away. I was like, wow, yeah, they're going to do that. So I love this film.
Well, for me, one of the curiosities of Dredd has always been that it's set in America. So when the Stallone one came out, I remember there was a deal with DC where DC was doing their own comics. And so all my friends were like, oh, what are these new comics, right? What's the deal with this Judge Dredd? And I'm like, oh, and then those comics were kind of shit. And I had to sort of get people into the real stuff. But one of the curiosities has always been, this is like the most recognizable British comics character, I think. And yet his stories take place in Mega City 1, which is sort of imagine if the entire Eastern Seaboard, sort of like from, north of New York and, up into like Maine, all the way down to like, Virginia, it depends on which map you're looking at. Just those cities just kept growing and growing and growing and just merged with each other to form one giant, massive city. And then thermonuclear war happened and it got cut off from the rest of the world. And so there's this sort of walled mega city one. And so for me, I think we've talked about this before, the sort of politics of Dredd. That for me, it was always confusing that the most recognizable British character took place in my country, and he's kind of a fascist. He's, he's a cop. And for me, there's always this part of my brain that was thinking, I know at some point this is how the Brits see my country. How do I understand that?
Well, it's interesting because when Dredd was created, Dredd went through several iterations before he hit the page. And the creators, obviously, like John Wagner, Pat Mills, Carlos Esquerra, they wanted to create this specific thing. And I think there were iterations that were going to be British. And then, and it was the further they could take it away, the more alien they could make it, the more they could get past the censors. So, all right. So, yeah, we're not going to mention Britain at all. And it's going to set in the far future. And instead of, certain things, we're going to have aliens and muties and all this other stuff. So they're able to get away with a lot more. If you do, we'll try and focus on the film. But if you do want to know more, there's a fantastic book. Well, there's lots of good books, but there's a really good one called, it's Pat Mills. Be Vigilant. Be something. Behave. But it's his secret history of the creation of 2000 AD, and he talks a lot about why Dredd is the way Dredd is, and that sort of thing. And knowing obviously that John Wagner is an American that was living in Britain as well. But yeah, it's weirdly counter to the culture of, and even so, in 2012, it's weirdly counter to the culture of, you had a lot of cop shows, and then in the 80s you had, cops were the heroes of all the action films and all sorts of things, and then you've got this future cop who, whilst being the protagonist, isn't the hero, really. And that's really the way this film works.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is the protagonist, as well as Judge Anderson, but like, hero is probably a bit of a push.
Yeah, I mean, I that's one of the things that I love most about this movie. But before we get into that, I mean, I wanted to ask about sort of, we both love this movie. And, John Wagner praised it as sort of getting Dredd right. And I mean, this is about as close to a perfect sort of first Dredd movie that I can imagine. And whatever tweaks I'd make a few, but they're pretty minor, and I'm super happy with it. But it occurs to me that I don't know how faithful it is. That, you were talking about like the Cursed Earth saga, right? I mean, the Cursed Earth saga has like the Burger Wars, where like, Burger King and sort of like something out of Martha Washington, right? Or that really was out of 2000 AD, where, sort of McDonald's and Burger King have armies and bizarre cyborgs and stuff like this. And 2000 AD always had a lot of that sort of satire, had a lot of sort of adapting a new movie that was popular, figuring out some way to make a strip out of it, or, turn it into a one-off Judge Dredd story. And right after the Cursed Earth was, The Day the Law Died, where, you've got the chief judge appointing a fish as a judge. Yeah. And I love it. I adore that stuff, but it's so wacky and crazy. And so much of Judge Dredd, of the comics, and so much of his universe is just filled with, like you said, mutants and wackiness and craziness, that in some ways the 2004 movie, while obviously no Dredd fan is going to like him removing his helmet, his bike is big and bulky, and he's got the ridiculous armor. And that movie is so over the top in a way, and doesn't take itself seriously in a way that this does. So I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it is interesting, because I think one of the real issues you have with the Judge Dredd universe is that Dredd is the straight man. Like, he is always the straight man. Like, he is, as you say, a fascist. Whether he is a fascist is debatable, but he is definitely the tool of a fascist regime. In that the judges are not just the law enforcement; they are the government. It's a militaristic regime. And the thing is, with the comics, because you have an infinite budget with the comics, you can do all kinds of crazy things. And I think the Cursed Earth saga is one of the best examples of that. They go off trundling across the Cursed Earth on this mission of mercy from Megacity 1 to Megacity 2. And you're right, on that journey, you encounter robot vampires, you encounter the Burger Wars, you encounter cloned dinosaurs that are being used for pit fighting, and all these other crazy things. Mutants that have there's one where a mutant army has carved the face of their leader onto Mount Rushmore. Like, all this craziness and oddness and wackiness encounters, and throughout it all, though, like, Dredd is the straight man. And one of the but they were always using that to hit things home. There's a couple of issues within the Cursed Earth saga where you meet an alien called Tweak. And Tweak is like a fuzzy-looking aardvark kind of thing, but he's being used for slavery, and you find out that Tweak actually, rather than being submissive and weak, is actually incredibly intelligent and incredibly strong and all this other stuff, and became submissive to protect his home planet and all this other stuff. It's really heartbreaking. And then all of a sudden, with all this craziness, you're a bit like, no, this is heartbreaking. And the final panel of that story is Dredd writing in his journal as they carry on the journey. And he's like, sometimes the human race is garbage. Like, literally. And you're just like, Wow. All right. That's a panel in a comic that's supposed to be an adventure comic, and like you say, so and it goes on like throughout the years. There's been loads of this stuff. If you were to put all of that verbatim into a film,
Mm-hmm.
it would just be too much. I don't think people could take it. It's just too much. It would be like you would literally go footsie. It would be like a sensory overload of all this information, and but it wouldn't work. You'd end up with something similar to like Batman and Robin, sort of like massive architecture and silly villains, and then like a central character. And so you have to play that down. The problem I think with the 1995 version is, firstly, I mean, Stallone was fine as Dredd when he's got his helmet on and stuff. That again, I say that first 10 minutes with the block war is actually pretty good. And it has things in, like it's got an ABC warrior, it's got Roadbusters in there, so you've got the ABC Warbot, Hammerstein. You've got a really cool looking Mean Machine. And like Mean Machine is one of the best looking characters in that film, and they're great from the comics. Like it's got some of the lunacy in it. But then it also sort of took Dredd to that place of giving him catchphrases and trying to make him a bit funny, and gives him emotions and all this other stuff. And you're like, I don't know. Someone smarter than me could pull it together. Maybe. I don't know if it's ever worked. But yeah, I think if you're going to let it settle in the mainstream, you need to sort of tone it down. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think. I like what you said about Stallone getting catchphrases, and it occurs to me that if you're going to invest that kind of money into a blockbuster, especially in America, we have this thing that I really hate about our fiction, that we want our heroes to be likable, right? We need to be able to identify with them, and some degree of identification is fine, but give me a alien unidentifiable character every time. I mean, I like the baddies. I always, I mean, come on. I mean, Darth Vader's the good guy. Okay. We all know this. So, I mean, that's my own personal taste. And so I think this film does that so much better. This film doesn't, I mean, you were talking about sort of it having the feeling that it's not really clear whether Dredd's a fascist, but he's certainly not the hero. And one of the things that I love so much about this movie is that nobody is the good guys. It is crystal clear that Dredd, what he's doing is unfair. I mean, we're told right away that 6% of crimes receive an officer responding, right? Yeah. So, you are, I mean, and that's key to the Dredd universe, that it's sort of the justification for the whole comic book fascism is like, hey, look, crime is out of control. It makes more sense than Batman, right? Because in Batman, we always say, why would you stay in Gotham City? Oh, good, the Joker's just turned us all into zombies yet again. Maybe it's time to move, Grandma. But in the Dredd universe, it's such a big city, you can't possibly police it. The crime is out of control. And so that makes it a lot more understandable that people would give in to gang life. This is all they knew. Advancing was all Mama knew. And so you even have that character who is ready to, is forced to sort of help Dredd and Anderson, who says, look, I mean, essentially, you're going to be gone. And I'm going to be stuck in this building. When's the next time we're going to get a cop over here?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things, and one of the things I do like about this film is they do give exposition. There are some slight exposition dumps to give you into the universe. Like, you get the Carl Urban voiceover at the beginning, which is fine because you need it for anyone who's not known this world. You need to sort of give them at least a bit of information. You couldn't just drop them into this, I don't think. But then Anderson provides some exposition, and especially when they do go to Peachtree's, there's that sort of like, she's obviously the cadet, she's being assessed by Dredd, and so Dredd's like, okay, tell me what you know. And so we as the viewer get to tap into that information, and she does. She says that I think at one point 97% unemployment in Peachtree's. Yeah. So 97% of the people in this building are unemployed. And so that leads to, okay, well, I've still got to pay for stuff, still got to feed my family. So I can't imagine there being a social support system in the Dreddverse, really, or at least a good one. And so, like you say, the fact that people are turning to crime or just general boredom is driving some of this stuff, like, is not surprising at all. And so, we'll talk about Marmar in a minute, but the guy, he's at the block medic, and this is a single guy, looking after 200 floors. And actually, he says, like you said, there's a scene where he's sort of giving the breakdown, like he gives another expo dump about stuff, and he says, like, we haven't seen a judge in so however long, and he said, well, you've got one now. And you can still see the guy's like, oh, good, we've got one now.
For how long?
For how long? Like, and he does sort of almost disengage from it. Like, at one point later on, they turn up at the med unit, and he's like, nope, I can't be a part of this. I've almost got to be, like, bipartisan in this whole thing. Like, and it's completely understood. Like, I completely understand why he does that. Yeah.
I mean, at the risk of jumping forward, I mean, a couple scenes that sort of stick out for me as things that I like incredibly that sort of get at this moral ambiguity. I mean, one is obviously, after this fight, Dredd has thrown a sort of flashbang, and they've taken out a bunch of guys in a corridor, and Anderson's got someone dead to rights, and Dredd says, it's assault on an officer, a judge. The sentence is death. And Anderson shoots him, which is such a great moment in the film, right? I mean, it's that moment where every Hollywood film would pull back, or conversely, let somebody do that and seem risque or cutting edge, and then by the end really strongly pull back. I think this film pulls back a little, but with the typical Hollywood movie, strongly pulls back and makes that person a savior figure, makes it all okay. This movie doesn't do any of that. And then later on, you see the wife and you don't see the child, but you're made to understand that they have a child together, of the person who she's murdered. I say murdered because it's an unarmed person who's in captivity. And she quite understandably, the wife says, well, I'll help you, but I'm not helping you to help you. I'm helping you to get you out of here, because as long as you're here, you're going to be shooting at my husband, and my husband's going to be shooting at you, and people are going to die, not just you people, but, civilians in the crossfire. And here again, it's not at all clear that it's a good thing that the judges are there.
No, the judges in this film are, again, sort of not seen as a positive presence. We get Dredd. I mean, one of the sort of, we'll get into, one of the flaws of this film is I don't think you get enough exposure to the judge system. You get Dredd, and you get Anderson, and then you get some corrupt judges that come later on, but there's very little of, and here's how successful judging works across the sort of the city. And that's fine. It's a short film. The budget was low. You couldn't do that kind of thing. But even when you get the intro section to this film, which is the sort of there's a car chase, which again includes the introduction to slow-mo, which is the drug of choice for this movie. And Dredd responds to this thing. It's quite brutal. I mean, the van that the guys are driving are like knocking people left and right. And the judges are almost not... They're not part of it. They're trying to avoid people. But there's that sort of note of... His response is like, people are down. Like, he's not like, oh my God, they're killing people. He's just like, people are down. I'm going to go sort this out.
And I'm going to kill them. Right. I mean, they're killing people. I'm going to kill them.
Yeah, it is literally just black and white, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. Like when the van does crash eventually, and he follows him into another block, they have that confrontation, and I like it. I think it's a bit silly, but it builds into that sort of notion. And it's not going to be just a standard execution. He takes a woman hostage, and then Dredd sort of says, what's it? It's your call, hot shot. And then the guy's like, what did you say? He's like, hot shot. And it's an incendiary. And he shoots him in the face with an incendiary bullet. And you're sort of like, again, you're like, that's cool. He's badass. It's kind of, this is what Dredd is. He's badass. But then you're also thinking, slightly overkill. Does he take some sort of pleasure out of this? Because that's excessive police force. Like, even if you're going to execute someone, it's fine, but to then shoot them in the face with an incendiary seems a bit much. So yeah, the judges in this film, while set up as the law, the thin blue line, I think we've sort of, I think we've used before, but they are not a good pacifying force. Like, escalation seems to be there. You know what I mean? There's no de-escalation of this. They don't come in to negotiate. It's like, no, we're going to come in. I'm going to break your kneecaps for littering. That's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sure Dredd has done exactly that plenty of times in the comic. I mean, there are so many strips in which he gives out what seems to be excessive sentences. I mean, here we kind of have a glimmer of that with a homeless person that, I mean, homelessness is a crime, basically. I mean, this is, I'm not going to say Giuliani's New York.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there is, I sort of felt that intro sequence was a little too generic, and I felt the low budget there. And the hotshot thing is, it's fine. It's a little more in that comedic realm of that we were talking about of the comic. But yeah, I mean, it's this thing about policing. I mean, I wonder, like, if this came out now, how it would be received in the wake of Black Lives Matter. I mean, we live in a different time in which I think in some good ways we're allowed to question policing in ways that we weren't before. And there is this paradox of, I mean, Dredd obviously sees himself as the thin blue line, right? I mean, without me, there is Mama. Without me, there is chaos. I am the one who arrives and stops that van mowing down people, right? And if that's your job, and if that's what you're doing, great. On the other hand, if you're arresting people for littering and, I mean, really what the peach trees are is, I mean, this is a ghetto. He's going into a ghetto where basically cops don't go and, interfering with these lives that, while those lives are miserable, he's not there to, like, distribute food and money to people. He's there to get the criminal and get out. And it's not going to solve anything.
Well, like you say, I think the homeless person, that they meet as they were going into peach trees, they see him, and he does say it's like, vagrancy, and he sort of says, like, past judgment, and Anderson again says, oh, it'd be like, I don't know, like 6 months or whatever in the cubes, but then they know that they're there for some people that have been killed, so it's like weirdly Dredd being, I don't know about compassionate is probably the wrong word, but that sort of thing, like, look, don't be here when we get back. And again, it's that thing of like, there's so much crime. Really, what it comes across is there's so much crime. Is dealing with you is just an inconvenience where we could be dealing with something bigger. So basically, sod off. And it plays for future. It's played for humor because the guy's got a sign that says, "We'll debase self for food," which is quite funny. So it's it's played up in some parts, but again, like, as it comes up, like you say, there are scenes in this film where you think, yeah, compassion could be used or could have been an alternative, and it's just not. Like you say, the execution of that guy, and it's then as you get to the end, we'll get to the finale or the third act of this film, because as it gets to the act, it becomes a little more Hollywood pedestrian, and some choices are made that I think they pull, like as you said earlier on, they pull back a little bit. But up until that point, like, yeah, Dredd is just a machine. Like, he'll just mow through people to get to his what he sees as the thing that he is trying to solve. So in this case, they go in. They're sent to peach trees because of these two people that have been killed. And then when he learns that there's something else going on, he learns about Mama, and he learns about the distribution of slow-mo. Like, that becomes his mission. And there's like, okay, well, she's up there, I'm here, so the mission is now go up and get her. We've got to stop the distribution of slow-mo. And anything that gets in his way is just a distraction. And that's sort of how the film sort of builds. But that's also Dredd. Like, he's just he's a very blunt tool. He deals with what's in front of him. And that, to me, that is a really is such an accurate portrayal of Dredd from the comics. That he'll just deal with things that are in front of him. He's not going, as you said, he's not going, well, Oh, I see why this has happened in this block, and we really should be looking at a social support structure that will give these people food and medicine and finances to support themselves, because that will then take away the drugs. He's like, no, I'm just going to shoot people till they stop.
Well, Scott, you can't expect that out of an American movie. Okay,
No.
we like our Dirty Harrys. Nobody in any American movie is ever going to stop and say, "What about the support network?"
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a liberal, and for years when I would hear British people talk with pride about the cradle to the grave support system, over here it's like that. It's like, what are you talking about, cradle to grave? I mean, like, oh my God. So yeah, I mean, our movies aren't going to have that kind of thing. But I do think, like, yeah, I mean, what astonishes me is sort of along the lines of what you were saying, is that he never stops to talk about his emotions. There are so many times where this movie communicates. I mean, you were talking about the use of exposition. There's so many times where this movie communicates without dialogue, where what's important is what's not said, where we understand what's going on. We understand what Dredd is going through, or what he's feeling, or his character, but it's not communicated through dialogue, and nobody ever stops to talk about their feelings, even though you get it. And I think that is really key to Dredd, and to getting Dredd right. This is not a guy who makes small talk, right? I mean, they make the smart choice of keeping the helmet on, right? Yeah. But Dredd has never in history said, "How you doing?" How's your day going? This is not a lie.
Yeah, he's not exactly sparkling conversation at dinner parties. It's not that's not his forte. And they do. I mean, one of the things we'll get on to Dredd, I suppose. But one of the things that they do from the off is, first you've got that intro, so you're shown that Dredd is ruthless and brutal and everything else. Yeah, you've got the humor, but when you are sort of like reintroduced to Dredd. With Judge Anderson. So you're introduced to Judge Anderson, and it's explained that she's a mutant and she has some psychic abilities, but she's also just failed. Like, she's failed by a couple of points, the cadet test or the judge test. So Dredd's being asked to do like an on-street assessment to see what it is. And you sort of get this view of Dredd straight away. I mean, the chief judge says to him, like, she failed by a few points, and his simple answer is, "Then she failed." Like, right. There's no margin for error on this. She either passed or she failed. But more than that, when you then get this assessment of Dredd from Anderson, like, she's asked to use her abilities, and you get sort of her saying, "Oh, there's another judge. I feel he's a male judge, and I get this sense of rage, but control." And then there's something else behind that control, and then she's cut off. So it's sort of like, "Oh yeah," and the chief judge says, "Oh, thanks very much." And so that's not really dug into. It's sort of, to me, is sort of suggestive of the fact that Dredd's a clone in the books. Whether that's sort of it's never really touched on, and whether cloning would be a part of this universe, I don't know. But again, it's that thing that I say, the first thing she comes across is not the control, not dedication to duty, not commitment to the city, is rage. Like, he has just this simmering rage, and then it's just under control all the time. And it's this sort of, and that's what you say throughout the film. Like, he never touches on that. Like, he's not going to sit down and go, "I need to discuss why am I so upset with everything?" Like, it's the injustice that's going on around me just drives me crazy. No, it's just part and parcel of him. Like, the whole thing is just, I don't know, it's never dug into, and it never will be, because it's not what he is. And I do kind of like that, but it's there from the offset. Like, you're told who he is.
Yeah, I think this Dredd is a complicated character. I mean, I think that, and in the comics too. I mean, but in the comics they've gone much further with the democracy movement, and with Dredd dealing with mutant rights and all of this stuff. But I mean, he's not a liberal in the comics. It's not like he's seen the light.
Yeah.
But I think that the Dredd that's presented here is very interesting. It occurs to me that one of the key things that always upsets, and I think we're supposed to be upset by in the 2000 AD comics, is this idea of selective enforcement, right? Mm-hmm. And we see this in real life policing, that it's clear that Dredd acknowledges that, right? Because in the stopping, in the sort of vagrancy comment to the homeless man, obviously Dredd is capable of making those calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to arrest you, right? I mean, now Dredd could just as easily say, I have the power of selective enforcement. We don't need to execute this guy. I have the power of selective enforcement. I mean, maybe dealing drugs in this particular ghetto of a high rise is, should not be a fatal offense. It should not be something that we're going to cart you around and lock you up for. He's capable of doing that. But I think and we'll get to like whether he changes or not. But I think that for as much of a thug as he is, he also represents a sort of understandable version of a conservative mentality, which, seems to me to be like, okay, this is the law. Yeah, you're right. Only 6% of calls are responded to. The solution to that is more judges, or you guys stop committing as much crime. In the meantime, this law's on the book, and I'm damn well going to enforce it. If you don't like that, the judges can change the law, but right now, this is the way it is. It's an understandable sort of mentality. I think it's at least he's not a bad guy, but he has that sort of like stereotypical, unexamined, very masculine sort of black and white way of seeing the world.
Yeah, and the thing is with Dredd, I mean, that was one of the problems I have with the '95 version. Is that he starts the film at least attempting to try and be that, that sort of thing, and it's more humorous. I mean, they make a joke about sort of in that at the start of the '95 version when he rearrests Rob Schneider's Fergie, Hershey, the character that another one of the sort of female judges, it's prevalent throughout the Dredd verse in the comics, says to him sort of like, Dredd, this guy, he's literally just got out. He was trying to survive. Do you not have any, do you not have any feelings about that? Any sort of like emotions? Ugh, there should be a law against them. Yeah. And it's played for humor. And you're like, yeah, a bit too on the nose. We get the point. This film's less sort of on the nose in many other ways, but this film's more like, he's not even going to engage in that way. Like, if you were to take the Carl Urban Dredd and put him in that situation, like, he wouldn't even respond to Hershey. He'd just be like, and walk off. Like, he's not going to try and make a one-line or even engage with it. But the problem with the '95 one is, by the end of the film, like, he's smiling, he is acknowledging that he's the hero of the city.
He's being cheered.
He's being cheered for doing what he's doing. Like, yeah, he's literally being cheered as the hero of the city. And then there's sort of, as he rides off to sort of defend his city again. Like, it's the end. Whilst there's some fantastic special effects and some awesome matte paintings in that finale, like, it looks stunning, and we'll get onto the look of the film later, but like, it's almost like the end of Batman '89. It's that heroic thing, and for a Batman film, especially sort of a Tim Burton film, you get the Danny Elfman music as it pans up, and you get the bat signal, and then you get the silhouette of Batman stood watching over his city. Like, that's what you expect, because he is Batman, and that's what I expect from a cape and cowl kind of film. That is not Judge Dredd. So to have him sort of like, to go through all this stuff where he's uncovered this massive conspiracy of cloning and his own cloned brother and corrupt judges, to then come out of it and just go, all right, I'm off to do patrolling, and then have him drive up on a spedway and have the silhouette there. It's that heroicism of this character, and that's the '95 film in a nutshell, and that's the problem with it. In this film, there's a little bit of that towards the end, which we'll deal with, but this Dredd is not that. Like, this Dredd's just sort of like all those problems that would just sort of just be, and that's why I like this Dredd more. Is that you said he's more complex? He is more complex. He has got some emotions, but he's not there to have an arc. Because this is one day. This may not even be his worst day. Right. Like, this is just a day being a judge. And so he's not going to start going, I've had massive revelations about how the judicial system of this city. Like, no, it's not. It's like I busted, there's been a drugs bust, and he's killed a bunch of people, and he survived, and he goes on, and that's it. And that's why I think this film, for me, works. But I also think it's the reason that it didn't work for a lot of people.
Well, and I think this gets into some of our own personal biases and some of our own
Mm.
personal prejudices that both of us like the small story.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, I can't. I am so sick of seeing stories set in futuristic worlds, dystopian or not, where, I mean, I don't want to trash Minority Report. I mean, I respect it. We've had a conversation about it. But Minority Report is all about, here is this interesting future world. Now watch me destroy it.
Yeah.
I have recognized this is wrong, and I'm going to stop it. So many stories wind up being some version of that, right?
Mm-hmm,
As you
mm-hmm.
said, like, I've seen the light. It shouldn't be this way. There's no point in which, anyone, these people live in this universe. And I think, there's this other thing of, look at how much morality changes. Look at how much we have put up with that is not acceptable. That nobody gets up, just wakes up one day and says, hey, I think we're killing too many black kids. I mean, things are acceptable and they have a momentum on their own. And people complain about their situation. They know their life sucks in this movie. Anderson knows that she wants to be a judge, but the judge system is not the be all and end all as it's presented in this movie. And yet it's like, this is the way it is. Here's this future vision. It's beautiful. The aesthetics of this movie are fantastic. I'm a sucker for aesthetics. And it sort of presents this worldview, unless you inhabit it for a day and then gets out. 90 minutes. I mean, imagine how horrible this movie would be at 2.5 hours, like a Marvel movie.
Yeah. No, you'd be exhausted. Like, I think you'd probably come out of it traumatized. Sort of like.
You might anyway at 90 minutes.
Yes. Yeah.
With the bullets ripping through people.
And I think one of the things that's interesting, like, you talk about the arcs in this film, in that point of this film being, it just exists within this universe. One of the key points about that is, we've said it's called Dredd, and Dredd is most definitely the protagonist, but it's not his story. At least I don't feel that it is. It's Judge Anderson's story. Mm-hmm. She is the point of view character that we are given. It's her that's on assessment, and it's her that has the arc. And while she has both, it's not even it's not a straightforward arc either.
Right.
It's one of those ones that, again, going back to that sort of that typical sci-fi, not even action, or the action film, or like you said, the arc is going to be, I'm going to bring down this system, and to sort of to bring in another Stallone film. If you think of like Demolition Man. Sort of they introduced John Spartan, the Stallone character, in this sort of like utopian universe, and then you've got these underlings that sort of live in the sewers and stuff, and he's going to basically, again, he introduces it and decides to tear it all down because he learns how this thing goes. And that's the typical thing. And when you introduce a Judge Anderson, she's asked, like, why do you want to be a judge? What is it that you intend to do? It's to help people, to make the world a better place, and to do it, and she's basically saying, like, to make the system better. And even Dredd sort of like, yeah, a lot of people have started that way.
Yeah.
And this film, by the end of this film, she is a much stronger person. I would say that she ends up becoming a stronger character. Mm-hmm. But there's that shine has been taken off.
Yeah.
It comes at a cost. And I think so, whilst at the end of most of these, if this was a typical film, the end would be Judge Anderson saying, no, this is wrong, and doing some of this stuff is wrong, and I'm going to try and, go off and become a protester, or, have some activist against the judicial system. But basically, like, she is incorporated into the system even more so than she is at the start of the film.
Well, I mean, I would say that the Hollywood ending of this movie is that the little kids from the peach trees come up and thank Judge Dredd and Anderson for having gotten rid of Mama, and how they're free of gangs. And you have some shots of them going to a schoolroom that's not a devastated war zone like the one we see in this. And then, Judge Dredd turns to Anderson and says, see, you did make a difference. Yeah. And then they walk off together. No, you're right. I mean, and I love that you were talking about the exposition. To me, the exposition that follows that conversation about wanting to make a difference. I mean, that's what people feel when they're new cops. It's what people feel when they're new teachers. I've dealt with that. I've seen people burn out because they wanted to make a difference so much. They take it home with them and they burn out. And this is just such a classic story. And I love that sort of arc of her character. But again, it ends, it's not even clear that Peachtree's is better off for them having been there. I mean, tons of people are dead. We don't really see their bodies being carted out, but we've seen them get chewed up by, Gatling guns. And there's going to be another gang person who takes over. There's not going to be another judge unless they're lucky enough to be in that 6%. And, what was this for? So, you could enforce the law. You could get that slow-mo off the streets. I mean, I guess it was being used by people in the beginning who were running people over, but that's not at all clear that was caused by the slow-mo. Mama's pretty brutal. I guess the implication is that she was more brutal than the gangs that she replaced. But, it's not like when we've taken out cartels, they're replaced by a softer, gentler cartel. That's not the history.
Well, one of the things is, I think we'll get back to Anderson's theory because Anderson's art, because I think that finale, when we get to it, that I think I have issues with the finale of this film, but also I think, like you say, so Anderson having the shine taken off her, like you say, she should come out of this, like you say, and be told that she's made a difference, and she doesn't, and it's sort of, it's that slightly downbeat. But we say that like no one in this film is a hero, and you're right, no one really is. But also, like, one of the things this film does is with Mama playing like Lena Headey, and Lena Headey's great. Like, she is brilliant in this film.
Amen.
Mama is almost given like a sympathetic backstory. Like, you find out like she's a hooker, and for whatever purpose, like she was slashed in the face, and so she decided to take power back and take out her pimp, and then took on these gangs. And the exposition we mentioned earlier is when they go to this medic, and he explains that, like, yeah, she took out the top, and there was the Mama clan, and then there was these other gangs. There was like the Judged and the Red Dragons and all this other stuff. And she basically went through them and killed them off and beat them to take over the whole of Peachtree's. And it shows you the sort of like she's worked her way down the block, bang, 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 until she runs this block. And there's a part that goes, so there's no war in this gang. There's no war in this block anymore. There's a single gang. That sounds like a better solution, because I'm pretty sure, like, it's probably not great, and you see that there's some brutality and stuff going on, but it's probably better than, floor by floor gang wars that were probably going on before. So now I'm thinking, so it was Mama brought peace to this block.
Yeah, no, and I love that early on when she speaks to the Peachtrees, she is, she stands with the knife that's sort of a curved knife at the guy's stomach and forces him to keep the cops out and bring them in and whatever. But then she speaks on the loudspeakers, and it's such a beautiful scene to me. It's such a, every moment is right. She gets that microphone. First of all, it's shot looking down. And the technician is in the foreground, and she's in the background on the floor. She looks like some, millennial kid with a scarred face who's a punk, who's just sitting on the floor with a microphone. She does not look like a gangster, right? She does not look like a kingpin character. And then she pauses. And when she speaks, it's not the speech of a supervillain. And I'm listening to you talk, I'm reminded how, first of all, I would list Mama among my favorite Judge Dredd adversaries. It's certainly in my top 10, despite that she originated with this film. And then secondly, I am thinking about how much movies, especially Hollywood movies, have failed to make sympathetic villains. Outside of like Magneto, and even he is so-so, depending on which film. I mean, it's like, come on, Thanos doesn't make any sense. I mean, usually we have these big bads that just, they're horrible, and the point is to get them punching. Mama, I have the same feeling you do, and it's also hard not to admire her and admire what she's accomplished in a sort of like Scarface way, right? Scarface, we love. He came from nothing. He came to America. He had nothing. And yeah, he was brutal, but look what he carved out for himself. And she has, if anything, faced worse circumstances there are no cops around. There's no system to work with in her case.
Well, yeah, and we'll get to that as well, because that's a bit of I feel, a plot hole in this film. But I mean, one of the things they do in this, they do continue to try and show how brutal she is. So that when you learn her, and they don't say it outright, but they say that basically she bit off a guy's genitals and sort of like, to start herself off. So she has a reputation that she then proceeds to maintain. Like you say, the technician that sort of supports us, like, is like basically the tech support, the IT guy for the entire block. You find he's got like tech eyes. He's got these sort of like, augmented eyes. And you do see a flashback of how he lost his original eyes. His mama gouged them out with her thumbs. And so you do see repeatedly that she is brutal. Like, she is uncompromising. But she almost has to be. Because, again, I think, that shot, is, as you mentioned, is very good. But one of the other things that this film does is, I think the cinematography is great throughout this film. But one of the things it does is this film repeatedly shows that Mama's quite short. Lena Headey's not a tall woman. Like, she's probably like 5'5", 5'6" at the most. So all the gang members around her are clearly taller than her, but they are scared of her. Mm-hmm. And so they don't try and compromise in any way. Like, she has like a second in command who's clearly like a head taller than her. And he is doing as he's told and following her orders and all this other stuff. Like, she is in control. And that's cool.
Right. And she achieves that through that viciousness. And I love what you're saying about the camera angles. And there are times where you're very conscious of the fact that it's shot from a profile. You're very conscious of the fact that she's shorter. And that it doesn't shy away from that. And it also, so much of this, what I love about this movie is not just getting Dredd right, not just being a fanboy, but also the ways in which it just avoids Hollywood cliches. There again is another one that, she's not, Tom Cruise on platform shoes, so that he's the same height. And yet you feel that same intimidation. You understand because you've been shown that brutality, and also her ability to make those decisions and enforce those decisions. She is not to be screwed with.
Yeah, but she's in charge of this block, and there is no doubt about it. But like I say, it repeatedly shows her brutality, but there was it never crosses into like joy. Mm-hmm. And again, one of the things I think that sort of like, one of the things that Hollywood does is they will try, and sometimes, they do it quite frequently. They'll pick a villain and they'll show he takes pleasure. It's not just business. He'll take pleasure in it, and this is where the Joker sort of like is the epitome of that. But there's others where they like, yeah, I'm bad and I'm good at being bad, and sort of, the almost like the campiness. Like, there is none of that with Mama. Like, it is all business. She's like, I've got a drug manufacturing and distribution business. Someone is threatening that. I'm going to stop them from threatening that in any way possible. That's it. She's almost as clear cut as Dredd, yes. In that respect. Like, she's like, here's the problem. Here's how we're going to deal with it, and then we carry on. And
they are the two characters that are most alike. They both stand out. And Anderson is, the more humanized, more normal, slightly more healthy, adjusted person who wants to make a difference and submits to this fascistic system, but still, but is also able to challenge it, and that's why she thinks she won't pass.
Yeah, and then, there's a great scene at the end with her that I really love of Anderson, because her arc is driven by this thing of being on assessment. She wants to be a judge, and she knows that Dredd's is a tough taskmaster, so she's constantly sort of like having to prove herself. And there's a great moment, is it a catchphrase? I don't know. There's a callback at the beginning when they're about to enter Peachtrees, and he says like, he says to her sort of, "Are you ready?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he just goes, he sort of like got a harumph at her. And then later on in the film, when they're about to go into sort of the final sort of showdown, it's like kind of people, he says like, "Are you ready?" And she's like, He says, "You look ready." And it's that sort of like, she's had that, I want to say growth. It's not. It's that acclimatization to the brutality of the violence. But it's also, I think, Dredd has a burgeoning respect for her now because of what she's gone through and the decisions that she's made. But with Anderson, I think they say that compassion, that human thing that she has, she she maintains it, which is one thing. But I'm trying to think what I'm saying. She's basically the most human character in the whole film. Like, you come across people, and there's some brutal villains in it, and it's weird, I suppose, to have her as the judge to say that, yeah, she's the most. Firstly, she's a mutant, so they acknowledge that she's obviously lived at the edge of the city next to the wall, so radiation has affected it, which has given her abilities. So she's already from a minority, and also being a woman, and also like being a judge. It's this weird combination with Anderson that, like, they keep trying to push this stuff to try and break her humanity. I think she bends but doesn't break, I think, by the end of the film.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I'm in love with Judge Anderson. I always have been.
Yeah.
I have always loved just Judge Anderson as a character. And I think that including her in the first Dredd film is so right. Using her as that audience identification, doing a sort of training day where, again, avoiding the Hollywood cliches, literally in the movie Training Day, everything falls apart. The whole point is, here's this amazing thing we're presenting of corruption. It's all going to fall apart by the end. Here, it's just a day on the job that doesn't, it's a tough day. It clearly affects both of them in different ways. But by the end, it's just another day. As another one of those short, smaller stories that we both like, where Dredd says, is it Hershey who says, what happened here? And he says, drug bust.
Yeah. She says, the chief judge. Yeah.
And he says, there's a lot of data, but they resisted arrest. It's just like, he's not, no attempt to play a hero, no attempt to swing in the accolades. But yeah, I mean, I think that Anderson has always been a little softer. I think Anderson as a character lends herself more to those sort of philosophical stories. I think, some of my favorite 2000 AD stories have been Judge Anderson stories. And I think that, obviously the psych, they don't really go into the psych-core, I think that would be hard to present in the film. So it's just like, oh yeah, that's a one-off. She's a mutant with psychic powers. And they don't really go into that too much or what she's experienced as a mutant. But I do think it's remarkable that, like you said, she sort of keeps her humanity. But this is a movie that it has a female villain, and really the main character, or at least your audience identification character, is also a woman. They are both tough as nails. One sort of is more kind and human and struggles to keep that humanity. But you never feel like either this movie is, there's some implied threat of rape, but you never feel like this movie is sexualizing Anderson. There's never a Michael Bay close-up on her butt going up the stairs, right? Neither of these characters are sexualized in any significant way. But at the same time, there's never a statement made by this film about, ding, 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 we're a feminist movie, Judge Dredd is uncomfortable with this or something. It's just there. And I think both of them sort of steal the show, in part because Urban is so reserved correctly as Dredd.
Well, you see about that, I think the only time, sex is a part of this film in two ways. Like, both, Mama was a prostitute who came up from that bit and was basically started to a point from sexual assault. Again, like, it's not, it's a story. It's literally a story beat. Like, that's her origin story. Move on. Like, now, that Mama is not really defined by that moment. More her entire past. This is just who she is. And with Anderson, it comes up when Kay, the guy that they find is responsible for the murders, Wood Harris, when he finds out that she is a psychic, and he says, all right, so you can read my mind. And she's like, yeah. And he says, okay, so what am I thinking about? And it basically it's a glimpse of him trying to shock her with some it's just his sexual fantasy of what he would do with it. It never, at no point does it sort of, if it was a Michael Bay film, it would go straight into his head and probably depict the entire bloody thing. But it doesn't. Like, she just basically punches him out and she says, you are immature. He does shock her then, because then he says, well, what about this? And you find out that then he's obviously done things like he's skinned people and done some horrendous things, and that does shock her. But that's it. But like you say, at no point do they ever really play into that probably anymore. It's not a point. It's the fact that Anderson is a woman in this film, or even that Mama's a woman, is irrelevant throughout all of this. And I do kind of like that, because it's a null point, isn't it? It's sort of like, she just happens to be a female judge. However, I was going to say, like, we talk about her humanity. There was something like Dredd in this is a physical force, and I love Karl Urban for it. I think Karl Urban is a great choice. I think he looks like the Carlos Esquera sort of like Dredd to me. Like he's sort of like crinkled just enough to look that way, and he is just like you say, that rage that's under control is a force of nature. Like, he is just the unstoppable force going through people. And so his way of dealing with things is just brute force. So when they sort of, they figure out, they take Kay in, they're going to take Kay in for the murders, but all of a sudden that's when the block gets locked down, and there's this realization that, like, well, why is Mama so worried about this one guy being taken away for interrogation? Like, what does he know? And so they sort of decide to question him a bit more. And this is one of the things they sort of, like, they've been around the block. We've seen Peachtree is a slum. Like, it's an absolute dump. But they pull a classroom, and it's got an American flag on the wall, which is bizarre in itself. But they pull him into this horrible classroom, and they interrogate him. And Dredd's response is basically to lift him up on the wall and to threaten him with punching his face in. And Anderson stops him, and she's like, no, stop. There's another way. And again, like, it can be taken as violence isn't the answer.
Right.
And she's
I think that's what it's setting up, right? It wants you to feel as if it's going there, right?
Yeah. And then she uses her psychic abilities to interrogate him in his mind. And you get to see in his mind, and sort of like she jokes about, it's incredibly empty in here. And, he tries to attack her with a gun, and she says a great line. She's like, just thinking about hurting me doesn't hurt me. Mm-hmm. And again, he tries to shock her, and there's all these mind tricks. But then it zaps out of his mind, and you just see his reaction when she's like, basically, I'm going to interrogate you. And his reaction is he's fallen to his knees, and he has wet himself. And she's like, okay, I now know this. I now know that Peachtree's is the hub for the manufacture and distribution of all slow-mo. And you go, and Dredd's like, all right, that makes sense. And it goes on from there. But at no point does anyone go, what the hell did you just do to him for that reaction in his mind?
Yeah, I love that entire scene. And I love that sort of reversal of setting it up as if she, again, I mean, I do think that the way in which she and Mama are female does play into both Mama's brutality and also, are sympathizing with her for what she's suffered. And also for Anderson playing with type as that person who wants to be a softer, gentler Judge Dredd. But then also in that scene as somebody who, perhaps because she's a woman, we think that she's going to be saying, violence isn't the answer. And we realize absolutely that what she's doing with that urination, which is, the way it's shot is, again, beautiful, just focusing almost like a comics panel on that urine flowing out that tells us, no, this is violent too. I mean, she's perfectly willing to do that. And maybe she rationalizes that it's better because, it doesn't leave marks. But we absolutely understand that if physical torture is violence, and is using it to extract information is at best problematic, this use of psychological torture in a world with psychics is also violent and also a form of torture. And here again, there's moral ambiguity, right? I mean, these are the good guys.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It keeps setting up throughout this film. You get moments of them with the opportunity to be the hero, to be that typical hero, like you say, the moment, and I think the finale does go there a little bit in some places, but you get moments where Dredd could sort of say, no, this is what's going to happen, or we choose not to do this, and like you say, he could sort of, Anderson could choose not to kill that guy or whatever. The choices that are made don't go there for the most part. It sort of turns a little bit towards the end, where there are some choices made that you sort of go, would they have made those half an hour ago?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like, you need the redemption in some places. I mean, the key one I think of is towards the end of the film, Dredd and Anderson have still got Kay, and they're about to sort of escape, and they are confronted by two kids. I mean, older teens with guns, and told to freeze. And Dredd sort of like, no, don't do this. Don't be. Like, he tries to talk them down, but then when they do, when the firing does start, because Kay tries to take Anderson out, Dredd chooses to stun the kids. And they make a point of showing the gun and him choosing to stun setting on the lawgiver. And again, like you say, for everything that's gone before, there's a part of me that's like, when a judge is under threat and their lives under threat, Dredd would just be like, fire, bang, bang, done. And so it's that thing of like, okay, we can't go there with kids, or we can't kill these. And I'm sort of like, it's a blunting of the edge. I mean, I don't know. That could have been like a producer's note or something. Like, we can't have Dredd killing kids. And you're like, well, he's killed everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me as the kind of. I also agree. It's incorrect. It's just wrong, and it does not fit the movie that they've established. I do sort of feel as if it's the sort of thing that a producer or somebody looks at and says, this is really dark stuff. Right? Yeah. I mean, this is just unrelentingly dark. We gotta give people something. And the thing is, that whole scene, I like that the kids are, want to make their bones by taking out these judges, but it's not necessary at all for anything. You never return to those kids who are stunned. Another point, I agree, it's incorrect. It just feels like, okay, this is bullshit. The earlier scene in which Mama opens with the Gatling guns or the rail guns, which, again, beautiful. Every time you look up the Peachtree Towers through that central area, I mean, it's amazingly beautiful, and I love it for just going against Hollywood, that so many movies, so many sort of big action movies, somebody always has some gun or some weapon where I think, why don't you just use that? Like, level that building. You've got bombs. You clearly don't care about civilians. In fact, as you say, half of these villains are sadistic. They seem to enjoy it. Why are you holding back? Oh, yeah, right, because it would be a plot problem. And I do think it's a little convenient how they run away. But returning to your point about the sort of pulling back, even there, I feel like you see children in the rubble going to their dead parents. You don't see a kid get his face blown off. And we know they're there, but, and I wish we would have.
Yeah, well, that scene, again, this is where, towards the end, they want to slightly differentiate the two, don't they? And this is the point where, up until now, like, you've had Mama sort of, I'd say, sympathetic origin. You've had this thing of her being relentless. You've had the judges being relentless. Like, I mean, when one of the reasons they're there is for the drugs bust. And so when they end, I mean, there's a great scene. We haven't talked about the slow-mo effects yet, but when they do a drugs bust and they kick in the door of the apartment early in the film, it's all done through slow-mo, and it looks awesome. Like, it looks really stunning, the slow-mo effects. But they are not bothered. Like, they go in and it looks like one person is reaching for a gun, and they take them all out. And there's two guys. There's two guys sat there doing slow-mo. Like, they are not much older than the two kids that Dredd stuns later on, and neither of them had guns. And one of them gets blown like a bullet hole blown through his face, and it is brutal. So it seems a bit incongruous. You've had that scene where literally the drug bus is then blowing the crap out of people, and then this thing later on. But it feels to me like towards the end of this film, there's this sort of okay, we've got to have a divergence. We've got to make Dredd more heroic, and I think it comes from that railgun moment. Where they start to try and to separate the two out. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I agree that, I mean, you could trace it to sort of, that I guess what you're trying to say is that Mama is so brutal in that scene that she's willing to just kill them all, sacrifice a whole half of the floor.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the way it's filmed, again, I mean, like, it looks, like you say, it looks beautiful, but the fact of the matter is, like, when it starts off, there's 3 railguns set up, and it's just 3 of her goons just like away at it, and she pushes one of them out of the way, and she takes charge. But when it focuses in on her face, like there's not like she's not like laughing maniacally or smiling. Like no, she's just. It's that thing of like if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. Like that's all it is. Like she's taken over and she's going to do the business. Like she's not afraid of getting her hands dirty. And when it's filmed, like these are her people. Like she's still probably killing people that works for her. Like this is her blood. And she's railing through that, like you see, like walls being dismantled, and there's a scene in particular where you see a woman like clutching at the daughter, and it pans across the room quickly, and there's a guy hiding behind a table, and that table gets obliterated, and he gets blown across the room, and then you see like a homeless guy with a shopping trolley, and he gets gunned down, and all this, like the violence and the death in that moment, and you just see like Dredd sprinting down the corridor to avoid the gunshots. Like she's got no problem killing anybody, and I think it's at that moment that, like, you're supposed to go, regardless of everything you've learned, Mama is the villain. Like she cares for nobody, and then they're sort of like, okay, now we've got to set Dredd up as having some morals to keep them slightly apart, so that when it gets to the end, it feels like a win. Like the right person has won.
I think you're right, and I think that it's not just that we, I mean, I guess if we saw the kids, getting killed, it would make her seem worse. But I mean, you're right about her going for that gun is strange, and its point is not immediately apparent because she doesn't seem to be celebrating it. She doesn't seem to be, thrilled with sadistic joy at this terrible thing that she's doing. But it also doesn't seem clear why she, needs to take. I mean, they're firing through walls. It's not as if like she's like, no, aim over there, aim for that guy behind 20 walls. So yeah, I do think that there is a sort of pullback, and you're probably right to focus that it starts there. You're definitely right about those kids, and those kids are shot in a way where you see their full bodies, and they're not being gunned down in slow-mo. Like, I don't think the earlier gunning down of those drug users feels as if it is just an execution of unarmed kids. And partly that's because of the slow-mo effect. It's also because they're in a room with a bunch of guys with guns who know, Judge Dredd and Anderson are busting into that room. Who knows who, I can't keep track of who's got guns. They're firing, there doesn't seem to be a conscious choice, aim at that kid's face, And if there is, we're not made to think that. Whereas with a later shot, it's just, oh, by the way, these judges would, Judge Dredd wouldn't kill a kid. Which seems wrong. And then, I mean, by the end, it's just, I think it retreats into that kind of Hollywood structure for a while. It just kind of, it wants to have a little bit of a good guy and a bad guy, even though everything good about this movie is the way in which it does that less.
Yeah, and that's not to detract much from the film. Like, it doesn't ruin the film, but it does start to do it. I mean, the one person I think survives that up until I think their final moment is Anderson. When she does, because she's taken hostage. Anderson taken hostage, and you learn more about the gun, the fact that the lawgiver is DNA tracked. So when Kay tries to use it on her, like, it blows his hand off, which is another great scene. I think it's quite good fun. But when she does escape, like, the fact of the matter is she's lost her primary weapon, which is a fail. out and out fail, and she knows that. So by that time, like, she has come to terms with the fact that, like, if I survive this, I have failed. And so when they get to the end, you meet the technician guy again, IT crowd, and she uses her psychic ability to learn his origin, and you find that he's just a victim. Like, he got caught, he's got no way out of this. His skills were basically shanghaied to work for Mama. That's it. Like, he's got no choice. So she decides to let him go, and Dredd questions her and says, like, what the hell are you doing? This is quite a simple sort of, like, he's a threat to us, you should be taking him out. And she stands up to Dredd saying, look, I know I failed, but until this is over and this assessment is complete, I have the right to judicial, to pass judgment, and this guy's a victim and I'm letting him go. If you've got a problem with that, that's your fault, not mine, sort of thing. And standing
Fail
up to
me
it.
at the end, but for now, I'm a judge.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great line. And I think, Olivia Thirlby's brilliant at doing it, like standing up to Dredd. And Dredd, sort of, in that moment, you can see there's a bit of respect. Like, all right, you're passing judgment. You're making a decision. Fine. And part of me wonders if that's the sort of the real turning moment for his decision later. But again, like you say, I don't know what the point was right now, but that's sort of her trying to retain her humanity. She's going to do that. Yeah. But also, again, this thing of the judges can be heroes. They can do the right thing. And it feels like it's slightly Hollywood. Yeah. Giving her that out just to remind you that, yeah, she killed that guy before, but she felt like she had to. She was ordered to do it. She made the choice. She pulled the trigger. But this is almost like a little bit of redemption for what came before.
No, I mean, she's a bad guy. I mean, look, in the real world, if you're executing, somebody, a POW, you are a war criminal and you should go to jail for the rest of your life. I mean, but you're right, emotionally within the film, I do think that, I'm not bothered by her making that choice. And I think it fits with her standing up to Dredd and her, her arc of sort of finding her readiness, her courage, but really more about her courage to stand up to Dredd than her courage to stand up to Mama. But, and I do feel like they keep her alive when she's a captive way too long, and she does feel a little sidelined from the final confrontation, given that it really is her story. But yeah, there is a part of me that feels that also her making that heroic decision is also sort of softening her, and then Dredd at the end chooses to pass her, even though, she's lost the weapon. He sort of hides it, and that's as much of an arc as we get for Dredd, which I think is cool. But it does seem as if her choice there and his choice at the end are all a kind of massaging of their roughness.
No, I'd agree with that. I mean, the ending, if we just jump to that, to Anderson's ending, is she hands her badge to Dredd, saying, like, well, I know I failed, and she walks off to get some medical treatment. And the chief judge says to him, sort of like, pass or fail. And he hesitates and says, she's a pass. And in that moment, like, okay, he's done it out of respect for the fact that, like, she's earned through, she's done this, she's proven herself as a street judge. But like you say, the truth of the matter is, if Anderson was to be kept as a character, like, she's willing to accept it. But if you really wanted to go down that road, and Anderson does this a bit in the comics, it took a bit of time, but is for her to actually hand him the badge, and instead of saying, "Well, I failed," is to actually say, "I don't this." Like, yeah, this everything I've seen today tells me I don't want to be part of this, and then walk away. And then Dredd saying, like, well, actually, she's a pass. Get her back in some way. But, like, the fact that she acknowledges and is also almost like regretful of the fact she's failed or feels that she's failed tells me that, like, no, she's completely okay and complicit with everything that's gone on in this film.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I'm curious as to, now that we're talking about it, I'm curious as to sort of why she makes the decisions that she does and why Dredd makes that decision. Presumably, she makes that decision because she wants to be, to redeem herself, to be a, kinder, gentler judge, to keep her soul amidst the terrible judge system, right? And presumably, Dredd makes that decision because he's learned to admire that, or she's stood up to him. But yeah, there is a feeling like, yeah, she has written this off, right? It's not just that she knows that she's failed. She doesn't need to turn in that badge and walk away, right? Is it wise to pass somebody who really has, especially who's willing to walk away, right? I mean, she has, yeah, maybe, the problem isn't that she has kept this guy alive and been kind to that technician. The problem is that she's been willing to walk away. And like you said, in the comics, it's a different character, it's a different universe, but if we apply that comics logic, she's going to walk away eventually, right? She's a liability. She's got problems with what we do as judges, thinks Dredd. Let's give her a pass.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, is she within the system,
Potentially. I mean, because that's exactly what happened in the comics. In the 90s, sort of Anderson handed a badge in and went off and traveled around space for a time.
Not the best stories, by the way.
No, they're not. And
good art.
Yeah, the art is they're not a lot of painted 90s painted art is good, but yeah, they're not fantastic. But she still left, and then she came back, and it's sort of dealt with. But yeah, it's the same. Like she's not. She's come to terms with having failed and is willing to walk away, and so, but then they still give her. I mean, Dredd gets his sort of like his heroic shot upwards, as he walks out with his bullet hole on, and you get the sort of into the daylight as he walks away. But the final shot of the film is Anderson in silhouette with a helmet, which we'll talk about, and has obviously been re-enlisted, however you'd put it, but rejoined the force. And he's walking out, and you have the utterance of Carl Urban's Dredd doing a monologue over, the voiceover saying, pretty much, the thin blue line. We are the line between chaos and everything. And it's sort of saying that she's now joined that, and she's part of it, and that's it. I mean, it's almost like, but it never feels like a celebration.
Yeah, I mean. So this movie's 90 minutes. I mean, I feel like, I'd like to redo that first chase, right? I know that both of us don't like the, sort of interlude with the corrupted judges that it,
oh, yes.
We don't need to see that in the first movie, I feel. And then they're just kind of suddenly, at Mama's at the end. And whereas I like, the sort of, I love the novel High Rise, and the sort of like we're trapped in this high rise. We've got to fight our way up every floor. Everything's gone crazy here. I want a little more of a progression just to see the toll it's physically taking on them and psychologically taking on them. I love Mama's death, and I like that bit at the end there. But for a movie that's trying to do a lot within a small budget, it's amazing what we don't see at the end. And this is a complaint I have with every single movie, basically. I always find that denouement is more interesting, right? It's like, okay, so you've overthrown the whole, precog system. What do we replace it with? All these people are going to be let out, right? Like, a lot of people are going to be mad about that. It's the same thing. Like, why don't we see those bodies being carted out from this massive adventure? Maybe it wouldn't seem like such a wonderful victory if we have, meat wagons and what, if we follow them to them being recycled, right? Which is clearly established in this movie. And we know from the comic what this is. They recycle the humans, as parts and food, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe then we'd feel like, well, is this really a society worth saving? Maybe we could see Anderson get that badge back and think, is this something I want? Yeah, I mean, I guess I have to do this, right? I mean, he passed me. How can I not take this opportunity? At the same time, I know the toll this first day took on me.
Yeah.
And and that's the stuff from the comic that I loved about her arc of, Judge Corey's death,
Mm.
and then Shabala, which sort of symbolically addresses just this is a sensitive person who might not be cut out long term. In fact, most of the psychics are
Mm.
gonna burn out. This is probably not a job that is gonna be easy on her. And the fact that she knows that going in, taking that back, we should have those moments. None of those shots really cost anything.
No, no. And that's the thing. I think from her, like you say, she just sort of dread going through this day and going on to the next. Not a problem, because he's done this before, and it's like I say, it's just one more day. Yeah, but for Anderson, the ending feels too easy, a little bit. But even say, I would want to go. You've overthrown Mama. What's going to happen with the block? So, you say you're removing the bodies. I want to go back in the block because there's an entire floor that's just been eradicated. With like machine gun fire. Like we've said, like judges come here, very very rarely. All right. What about repair people? Is this going to? How long have they got? How long has this block got to live with with bullet holes throughout that building? How long is that a penthouse room off limits now? All these other things that you think like I say not just the bodies but the survivors. Like there could be people that survived, but their apartments gone. Like and if anything, one of the key ones, what do you say? Sort of like violence loves a power vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
Those other gangs going to come back. Is this about to get worse for everybody?
Yeah, I mean that block is filled. I mean, that block. I love the Judge Dredd blocks, and that is another thing that this movie does so well is, it doesn't do the block wars thing that you were talking about, but just the idea of just setting it in one block, and the idea that there's the stereotype of like there are a million stories in New York, yeah, there are a million stories in Mega City 1. Every block is its own universe. And I think if anything, this movie does that and cements that feeling more than most 2000 AD stories. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this block is filled with, gang members. Those people aren't going to go away. They're not going to repent because they're still unemployed. There's still not, if anything, there's more than 97% unemployment now. There's that wonderful scene with the sort of skate park that is like 100 stories high that Judge Dredd and Anderson, with their convicts sort of escape onto. And it's so absurd, but it's also so wonderful. Like they don't try to help those kids. Nope. They're latchkey kids. They're sealed outside of the building. At no point do we see their parents going like, it really sucks that like those doors came down and stuck my kids outside on the skate park, 100 stories up. Nothing about this is going to get any better. There's no next day in which, I mean, although here's it's a beautiful shot. I absolutely love the shot, but symbolically, another way in which the movie sort of pulls its punches or tries to give you that happy ending is that wonderful shot of the doors opening and the light is coming in and, a new day has dawned. Yeah, well, maybe that new day is not going to be so good. I mean, now you've got 12 gangs vying for territory now.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it's not going to address that because the film doesn't want you to think about that. Like, Hollywood film, no Hollywood film wants really, you to really think about that. I mean, every great action film has that, doesn't it? Really, like if everything from like Die Hard or Speed or anything like that, or even where you go, what is the true ramifications of this? Like, there's going to be some sort of ramifications, but yeah, you're not really supposed to think about that. It wants you to think about the bigger world, but also not. I think that's one of the weird things about this film that we talked. You mentioned there about how both of us have sort of said in the past how the corrupt judges that come in, the 4 judges that Mama seems to have sort of connections with come in. They come out of nowhere. They actually acknowledge they're from a different sector, and then they come in and they're dispatched pretty quickly. Again, I'm not too worried about that. But it's the big problem I have with this film is beyond Dredd and Anderson, at no point do you see a competent judge force. There's two judges that turn up and are literally turned away at the door, and they're like, "Oh, we can't open the doors. It's a bit of a crisis. We were doing a test, and now they can't open." And the judges are like, "All right." And you say, like, well, you're useless. And then the four corrupt judges turn up, and they're allowed in. And so you've met two judges that give up the first hurdle, and then a bunch of corrupt judges. And you're like, so what? Is this like Gotham City? Is the entire police force corrupt? Like, how many good? Yeah. Is Dredd the only one? You know, is what is it that this looks like? But at least one of those judges, they get you a bit of a justification, which I can side with and I can completely understand. There's a line where he says, like, to Dredd, he says, do you know what this city is? This city is a meat grinder. It will take you up, it will tear you up, and it will spit you out. So why should I be giving myself giving up for this city? Like, you know, why not make money when I'm trying to do it? And sort of, again, is that part of you goes, yeah, all right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are great lines. I feel the same way about them. I want them to be assigned to somebody else because I don't need the subplot. And I think you understand why. For me, it feels wrong. For me, it feels like this is something that should be reserved for a plot in a sequel. You know, I don't want the Batcave invaded in the first Batman movie, okay? Yeah. It's supposed to be a big deal when that happens, right? I don't want that to happen in the first movie. I don't want somebody else to drive the Batmobile in the first movie. That should be a big deal. We need to establish that status quo. And you're right that there is ambiguity there. I mean, even in the comics, there's this sort of like where I'm sure there have been corrupt judges. I can't think of one, you know, but you certainly see a lot of judges who, you know, I think like, you know, they're just falling off of railings and they're just getting blood. They're the like red shirts of Star Trek, you know, where it's like, you know, they went through the same academy, but some of these guys, and of course you got to have red shirts, right? So they're going to be judges. And of course it's dramatic to be like, we're after this perp who's killed 10 judges. But that's kind of a generic requirement that I think they've gotten better at over time. But in this movie, like you said, you don't know whether this is Gotham and everyone is corrupt. You don't know how. And the other thing is that really matters because this is a movie about whether Anderson's going to become a judge and whether that's worth doing. Are they outliers? Obviously, Judge Dredd is an outlier, right? He's the ultimate badass judge. But are they outliers in the sense that they even want to make a difference anymore?
Well, and that's the truth. You know, you say about having the line assigned to somebody else. Like that line could have gone to Kay, the judge, you know, the criminal, or anyone else. There's a number of sort of people that could have gone to because, you know, instead of it being, we're corrupt judges because of this, it could easily be, no, I'm a gang member because of this.
Right.
You know, I tried to get a job. I tried to live the way my best possible self or whatever. Like I tried it, didn't get me anywhere. Now I work for Mama and look at this. I can, you know, I've got money and I've got this and I've got that. Like, you know, this city chews people up and spits them out. Like, you're right. By having the corrupt judges there and not having a counterpoint to say all the other judges are fine, I don't know. It just feels like I say it should be. If anything, I would actually quite like that as a second film. I mean, in the comics, in the Dreadverse, there's a squad called the SJS, the Special Judicial Squad, which is the judges that judge the judges. So they've got like their internal affairs, and they all wear, you know, in the usual sort of like, you know, subtle tones that is the Dreadverse. They all have skulls on their helmets, and you know, they wear like black sort of studded outfits rather than the usual stuff. So like there's a story to tell there, just not in your first film, you know. And I mean, if anything, there's a collection of stories that collected together are referred to as the Pit. Which is Dredd is assigned to become a sector chief of a sector and look after it and basically wheedle out corruption. Like if you wanted to do that, do that. You know, you could easily probably do that with this film verse. But I don't know. It just feels like it's a one of the few big mistakes I think this film makes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, for me, I mean, thinking, I don't know if it's that I think as a writer, I just kind of, feel things thematically, that thinking about what it is that we want in a first movie. The number one mistake that people seem to make, and I seem to see in Hollywood, is, everything in the kitchen sink, right?
Mm-hmm.
We, I mean, even the Cursed Earth saga being in the first one, I see why you want to do that, especially at that time, that storyline looms large, so many great storylines have come since then, or were really, really recent when that movie came out. So I get why you'd want to go there, but that whole story only makes sense as getting Judge Dredd out of Mega City 1. You've got to know what the status quo is before you disrupt it. And so we feel what a big deal it is to go out into the radiated waste, right? Nobody does that. That we don't feel that at all in that movie. I mean, some people say it's a big deal, but you're just thrown into it. And the same thing here, that, what this movie gets so right is doing that small scale. This is a day on the job. The only thing that's really exceptional is that it's introducing Anderson, but she's the audience identification character. It gets so much right that it's almost extra infuriating that it introduces these judges and doesn't give you a sense of whether or not, or we don't need to know whether or not the judge system is a system that we would personally endorse or not, but we need to see whether or not the system that is going to judge Anderson and that ultimately Judge Dredd is lying to at the end, right? I mean, he is misrepresenting the facts, which is cool, but I mean, it is a departure, or a character arc, however small. But is that a system that it is correct to lie to? Is that a system that it's worth belonging to? Is that a system that maybe it does terrible things, but it has an esprit de corps? It has, it's trying. We don't really know in this film.
And that's the sort of thing I think, if I was given the opportunity, and I don't know what Alex Garland and Peter Travis were really going to aim for, because we're never going to get a sequel. Unfortunately, we never got a sequel to this film, which is tragedy in itself.
Amen.
But I mean, both you and I know that the original concept or the original pitch they put forward included Judge Death,
right?
Who is one of those Judge Dredd nemesis. He's sort of been around for in fact, his first appearance was also Judge Anderson's first appearance.
Yes. Is it 148?
Yes, well, yeah, so quite early days. I mean, back in the sort of 78, 79. But to go straight to Judge Death is a bit of a stretch. I mean, this supernatural entity and the dark judges and lots of other stuff would be a hell of a jump for anybody. Like,
Yes.
it's as you say, it's that Avengers syndrome, isn't it? Like, got everything in the kitchen sink. Who's the biggest villain? Throw them in. You could, and I think they pulled it out, and the intention was to build up to that at some point, whether it be film 3 or film 5 or whatever. But it should be an expansion of the world, wouldn't it? Film 1 is Die Hard. Right, we're trapped in a building. Here's how the judges. Here's how badass Dredd is. Here's Judge Anderson. Here's what the world's like. It's a rough, tough, horrible place. Film 2, here's the judicial system. It's a slightly bigger story, but you're going to learn about corrupt judges and some other bits and pieces. Film 3 is you can then introduce maybe, maybe some supernatural elements and some other bits and pieces. You've already got a psychic, and you build up. So by the time you get to the Judge Death film, you go, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. That point, you got to ask yourself: does this make sense at this point? And I'm glad to say that they said no. Judge Death doesn't make sense at this point, but also, like I say, those corrupt judges feels a bit like.
Well, and you're right that, like, I mean, that was the original pitch, right? And we're both glad that it wasn't taken. I agree with absolutely everything you said. I think what I read was that the revised trilogy that Garland envisioned was the second one was going to explore origins and the judicial system, exactly like you said, and the third one would be Judge Death. And like you said, especially if you introduced I mean, that corruption of the judges would fit perfectly in the second one. Sort of, it's also a widening of scope, right? Widening from one block to, Mega City 1 more broadly to the whole universe, sort of with Judge Dredd. But you can see how and I love what you said about sort of introducing the psychic elements. So then the goofiness of of Death is not so goofy because he is the Joker. I mean, he is, if you're going to think of who is the arch nemesis, right? He is the arch nemesis that immediately comes to mind. Not as commonly depicted as, say, the Joker is for Batman, but he is like that. And you can understand the urge to put the Joker in the first movie. The Burton one does it and sort of threads the needle and does it fine. But it is a gothic adventure. It's not establishing... I mean, Judge Death is the supernatural force. How do you get people to understand this futuristic world that in this movie it's shot a lot more like Blade Runner than it is, a conventional, dumb, action movie? You're supposed to understand how that works, the judicial system, and a parallel universe that we drew this undying being from who can possess people. That's asking a lot.
And that would have ended up being a 2.5-hour film, unfortunately, I think. And that's but I think you said that mentality to everything in the kitchen sink is exactly that, because that's what that film would have been. It's like, we're going to introduce Dredd. We're going to have to introduce Anderson, because if you're going to keep to the comics, she is the solution. Spoilers for a 40-year-old comic, but like she sacrifices herself to encase Dredd, I think. But I mean, this is one of the things with the with probably the skill of John Wagner when he was writing this is he would take some of the ridiculous, and then when you have a story like Death, the introduction of Judge Death, he would then utilize some of the silly in with the serious. And Judge Death, when his first introduction, drawn by Brian Bolland as well, actually, and looks amazing. So, when you say about the Joker, I was thinking about the Killing Joke, and obviously, he introduced Judge Death. The story itself is relatively, some parts are played for horror, then there's some bits of humor. But the film has got, the story has got those moments of horror. Like you see, like you say, the body being resurrected. You see corpses and sort of thing. However, when you see Death defeated, like his body's blown away, and his essence then jumps into Anderson as a willing host, they encase her in a thing called Boing. And Boing is it's a plastine kind of thing that you can sort of spray on yourself. So it's a spray that creates a plastine bubble around you, so you can bounce in a Boing chamber, which is a big room where you can literally just bounce around, and it's someone's like a hobby. But then they utilize that to encase and trap Death. And so it's sort of like, and Boing was introduced, let's say, 10 to 12 issues beforehand. So it was, it's sort of it wasn't until I reread a lot of stuff, I was like, oh, Wagner, you clever little monkey. You've done this silly story about Boing and how it gets used and it ends up sort of being misused in the city. But then you've also set it up so that you can use it to encase Death later on. And so, he takes that silly and that's part of why the comics work. It's because the silly is there. The wackiness is there. But it still integrates with those more serious and darker elements. And again, like I said, you'd have to build up to that in a film world. If you were to try and do that to the mainstream, you could not sell to someone, by the way, we've got a Boing chamber as well, which is this plasticine stuff that you can sit in and you can do stuff. And then we're going to use, they'd probably do a very different ending, but like, you need to accept certain things. And, that was almost the problem with the 95 one, wasn't it? The 95 one looks great. Their Mega City looks awesome. Like, the vehicles are great. Even the uniforms look the part, more so than probably the 2012 version. They have a different purpose. But the thing is, again, they try to throw too much at you. You get sort of like jokes about recycled food. You get, Block War. You get the Angel Gang. You get clones. You get the fact that the bikes hover. You get all this other stuff, all thrown in. It's that kitchen sink mentality. But at the end of the day, you're like, it's a bit much, and it all feels a bit too silly. So that's why I like this. It pares it down. As you and I said, we like the smaller stories, and even some of the aesthetic choices just work. This is a grittier world. So if you're going to go for a gritty world, you don't want a big shoulder pad and a massive eagle and big green boots.
Yeah.
And in shoulder pads, or elbow pads. No, we're going to go for something that looks tactical and beaten up and like biker leathers. And they go, yeah, I fully accept that. That makes total sense.
In looking at research for Judge Dredd recently, I came across a interview with Alan Grant, who usually, he wrote a lot of classic stuff with John Wagner. And if I'm remembering correctly, Grant said that Wagner gave him the best advice on writing he ever got, which was take every idea and push it to the point of absurdity that it just absolutely breaks, and then pull back one step. Right? And I thought, boy, that is revealing about John Wagner, and brilliant advice. We always talk about wanting movies to be like the fullest version of themselves, right? To commit to what it is that they're doing. And the idea of committing to the point of absurdity, but just not going so far that the audience just goes like, is this a parody?
Yeah.
And I think that this movie does that, right? I mean, this movie does that gritty, realistic version. It commits to it. It trims out that stuff that doesn't fit. There's no Boeing. There's no, there's no aliens. There's no, there's not even a psychor, right? It really has pared it down in another movie. And it really is such a shame that we didn't get a sequel, and that, this has kind of become a cult film. This is, very well revered as a film. And yet it's, when we talk about John Carter, we talked about Tron Legacy, we've talked about these movies where essentially our analysis of the film, at least financially or as a decision from the studio, is that they threw way too much money at that first movie. What they needed to do was exactly what Dredd did. Pare it down, tell a smaller story, make it really, really good. Focus on the writing, focus on the directing, focus on the cinematography, focus on the acting. They did that. They got basically everything right, and it still didn't work. And we still didn't get the sequels, which could have done, the wider world of the Judges, and it could have done Judge Dredd. And imagine if those movies had been successful and they could have had $200 million. How awesome would that be with Alex Garland writing Judge Dredd with a $200 million budget?
I think I do. There's always that what if. Like I always dream about the what if, and I never understand. I never completely understand why this film failed, because it's a number of reasons, and I get like the financial ones. It's an R rating. It's a hard R as well. Like this film does not hold back, so it restricted the audience. Fine, it's still a comic book film. Fine, so that maybe reduces the audience. It's a sci-fi film, so it's not. The thing is, like when you look at Deadpool as a comparison, which again reduced budget because they didn't have faith in the character, but did absolute gangbusters, and rightfully so. It's a good fun film, and it does exactly what it says on the tin, and it keeps it cheap. But the difference, I think, is you had Ryan Reynolds massively involved in all the marketing, doing all the silly stuff he did, which was incredibly creative and incredibly daring. And so people were like, "What is that?" I've got to say, we know that firstly it was a relatively known IP in the comic world, but in the mainstream, like it became the Ryan Reynolds character, and so it was recognized. And also, it was funny. Like people will get on board with most things if they think it's funny. So action comedy, all this stuff, they will get on board with Dredd. I think it's so in your face, so brutal, and so sort of things, but it doesn't have the comedy that I think the mainstream needs to be able to accept some of this stuff. And that's not. I don't think it wanted it. I don't think they should have done it. I think it's exactly the right way it should have been done. But you know, it's one of those. Maybe it's too brutal. With the marketing on it was okay. It was fine. I think that the you know, like you say, you see the score or other stuff, but there's just something that the mainstream were just not ready for. Dredd in 2012.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, first of all, in 2012, there have been so many comic book movies, right?
Mm.
I mean, the audience, you need more than just this is a comic book movie. I mean, that, if anything, is a stronger negative. I do think that the marketing for this, I mean, you look at the poster, it looks generic. It looks like, yeah, I'm a badass in a vaguely future world. It doesn't feature Anderson. It doesn't feature Mama. You know, what makes this different? And I often have, in some of our conversations and in thinking about art, used sort of Mad Max Fury Road as a touchstone. That's a movie that, what in the world do you have to market? Right? I mean, like, you know, remember that Mad Max guy that nobody especially likes and doesn't remember all that fondly? Well, we decided to recast him and do another one, you know, decades and decades later, that nobody asked for or needed. And also, he's not even the protagonist. And, you know, it's 3 hours long or whatever it is. And, you know, how in the world do you justify that movie? And it seems to me you justify that movie on the basis of its visuals. You run that commercial and you make people feel as if they're going to go someplace, right? I mean, I want to go someplace with art. I want to enter a different world. And I don't know what the plot is of Mad Max Fury Road, seeing one of those commercials, but I know it will be an experience. I know that that looks amazing and I want to see it. And I think that they could have done that. Obviously, this came out earlier, so there wasn't that kind of model, but they could have, you know, the scary thing is if they had done something like that and cut together, like, you know, Mama and the visuals of just like the city and the bullets flying across and people getting chewed up as much as you can sort of show, and just give that visual distinctiveness to help people think, okay, this is going to be a ride, and I don't know what this story is, but it is violent and it is stark. If they had done that, probably people would say, yeah, looks too much like Blade Runner, and remember, that didn't do well. We're not selling a feeling here, guys. So I don't know.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you know, neither of us are marketing guys. There was obviously a reason they marketed it in the way they. The thing is, they lent into some of the right stuff. Like the trailer contains some of the slow-mo look. It contains some of the score, which I think is great. It just, like you say, it's that thing of like, what's the hook? What's the hook that brings people in? Like they were just hoping that the name Dredd was going to be enough, you know, I think to an extent. But you're right to make that comparison to say Fury Road, because that trailer is mental.
Yeah.
Like that trailer, you watch that trailer and you go, I don't know what this film is. I know you're telling me it's a Mad Max film, and I can see that Tom Hardy's supposed to be Mad Max, but like you've got guys on poles on the back of like lorries. You've got the Doof Warrior there with his guitar and flames. And then you've got like all this other bits that, like, you know, the colors keep changing, what's going on. And then they're like, yeah, go see it. And I'm like, I will. I think I will. But with Dredd, like you say, the trailer's fine, but I think there was a fear of the violence, the fear of the bruise. Again, just looking at what the year this came out, you'd had Iron Man, you'd had, like, you know, Watchmen, and this other stuff, and I think they were looking at it and going, how do we market a non-hero?
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to tell that it's called Dredd. Dredd's got to be the central figure. He gets the hero shot at the end, because that shot at the end is of him when he's pushed Mama out the building, out the window and stuff. Is clearly a trailer shot. There are several shots in this that you go, that's a trailer shot. And they wanted that, but the rest, I'm like, no, there are bits in this you should have shown, but you probably couldn't because of the level of violence. So I don't know. It must have been quite restricted. But I've never met anyone that's watched this film that hasn't liked it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I don't either. You know, I mean, it's I can't imagine anyone not saying it's 8, 9, 10 out of 10. It's in that range. If you can tolerate action movies and sci-fi movies, you will like this movie. Yeah, and the other thing is, it strikes me as another kind of comparison is that obviously RoboCop was strongly influenced by Judge Dredd. This movie feels influenced by RoboCop in turn. It feels very Verhoeven RoboCop, and and in good ways. But there's a kind of like sardonic sort of attitude toward that violence that, while not as goofy here as in RoboCop, there's a kind of celebration of brutality, of a futuristic, brutal world that I don't know that they can sell RoboCop today. I don't know how you do that kind of, of tone.
Maybe the marketing for this could have watched RoboCop, or even more importantly, watched Starship Troopers. Like, if you'd have done the marketing for this where it was those adverts of like, I'm doing my piece, I'm doing my part, I'm doing my part, and then the kid coming out going, I'm doing my part, and then all laughing at them, that sort of thing. Like, do some marketing. I mean, they obviously didn't, I don't think they had the budget, but you had all the costumes. Just bring the people together and do some stuff. Like, I would love to see some of that.
Like a judge recruitment video.
Yeah. Or even a judge, or even like a judge warning, sort of like, where they're trying to sell the judges as being your friend, but like in a true John Wagner fashion. It's sort of like, if you're suspicious of this, or if your friends have committed a crime, report them to your local judge, and they will deal with them. They will deal with them in a suitable fashion, in a fatherly kind of tone. Cut to a judge beating the crap out of someone.
Or a kid, crying as his parents are taken away, for some crime that he's turned them into.
Yeah, I would love to see a series of adverts of that, of sort of like, them trying to sell. If anything, I think, you could look at modern day. Recently, we'll have to wrap up in a second, but we'll wrap up on this point really. Recently, with the sort of people losing their jobs and everything else through COVID, the British looked at in particular artists and the arts and said, well, we can retrain you, and you can. So there's a picture of a ballerina, and it said, Sophie could be a programmer in her next job. She just doesn't know it, and it landed flat. You know what I mean? Like, it was ridiculous. Right. But it's that typical government advertising propaganda. Like, this film could have done that. A series of adverts that sort of lean into that. We're trying to be friendly, but actually, it's a veiled threat. We're watching you, sort of thing. Do all that 1984 stuff. Do all that sort of Starship Trooper stuff. I think that would have been an awesome marketing campaign.
Yeah, I think that's very clever. Oh, it could even be, sort of, join the judges, or go on a ride along with this film, join the judges, have adventures.
Yeah. That's
like,
it.
Excitement, just like brutality.
Yeah, sell Mega City as a holiday destination, sort of like, Mega City, the city of the, like Detroit, city of the future, meet its friendly people. And then you get sort of like, pictures of like Mama and a gang and whatever. Like, if you'd have advertised this and acclimatized people to what it was in a funny way, in a humorous way, I think people would have gone, and there'd have been more acceptance of the brutality and the violence that gone with it. If anything, maybe this could have leaned a bit more. If it had lent into it any more in the film, I think it'd have had that comparison with RoboCop, which I think would have been detrimental. Right. But do it in the advertising campaign. Get people through the door. There you go. We should be marketing people. We've just solved it.
Well, it is true that the most important thing, marketing, and I'm horrible at it, having done a million Kickstarters. The thing that I realized that changed everything was realizing I don't need people to like what I've done. I need to get them to buy it, and then they get to like what I've done. I don't need to, you don't need to represent the film correctly. You need to get them to, see that excitement, feel something, and go see it.
It's butts in seats. And I can't remember who said it, but there was a marketeer who said, especially about modern cinema, as long you get them as many people butts in seats that first weekend, it doesn't matter. You could have a 95% drop off if everybody's already gone to see it that first weekend.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. You've paid for it.
Well, and if you have a movie like this where everybody who sees it likes it, they're going to say to their friends, yeah, you're thinking RoboCop, you're thinking Starship Troopers, you're thinking a little tongue-in-cheek. That's not what this movie is. But trust me, you'll like it. It's violent, but yeah, that's what you want, right? But you can't get to that point until you get those butts in the seats.
Exactly. Anyway, we've covered time. So, any final thoughts on 2012's Judge Dredd?
Well, I'm surprised it didn't do better because my understanding is that all Brits were required by law to see this. So, I mean, go see it. If you don't, I hope we get more Dredd stuff, but, you will like this movie. It will not revolutionize your idea about anything, but you will enjoy it, and it is a well-made movie. I wish there were more movies like this. What about you, Scott?
No, exactly the same. Yeah, please go check this out. It is a cult film. It's one of those films. It's going to be in some case, I think if it's the 21st century Blade Runner, it's one of those films that people derided at the time. Go see it. It's really good. Make your own decision. More than anything, Carl Urban is a massively underrated actor, and I'm so glad he's getting more attention for doing things like The Boys, because he is ace. And the fact he agreed and actually proposed that he keep his helmet on for the entire film just goes to show how committed they were to this film. So fair play to them. I love this film. It may be that I love it because of how piss poor 1995 was. But I do. I enjoy this film. I enjoy the fact it's brutal. I enjoy the fact that there are moments of humor in it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's little bits of dark humor in it, and it works to me. But is it perfect? No, not by a long shot. But it is better than some of the other stuff that we've had pumped out to us in the last couple of years. So definitely go check it out. But anyway, we're going to go on to our last film of this season next week, or in the next episode. And it's going to 2017, I think, 2016, 2017. We're going to go into Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets. And it did occur to me, whilst we've been talking about this, that the last three films of this season have basically been films that we enjoy. I haven't watched Valerian pretty much since it came out, but we all enjoy, but didn't do well. Mm-hmm. So it's quite interesting to sort of see how we're digging into that. So I'm looking forward to for us talking about Valerian, which was your choice as well, actually. So I'm looking to see how we take that.
Yeah, I am too, and I like that we've both done. I mean, Dredd is a mutual love. Mm-hmm. We both are unabashedly admirers of this film, but I think that Valerian is sort of like the Julian John Carter, where I like it and I see flaws, but I am like, but it's so much fun. Look at that. So I think it's fun to just kind of examine what makes us happy, and then sort of see the flaws and see another perspective on it.
We will definitely get to talk about Dane DeHaan being used as an action character, which that's some odd casting, but
I don't get.
But yes, excellent. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And if you do want to talk to us more about Dredd or John Carter or any of the films we've talked about before, you can find us on Twitter at PodTimeSpace. And of course, if you enjoy the show, leave a review. Let us know what you think about it. I don't care if it's 5 stars, 2 stars, whatever. Just leave a review. It's always good feedback, and we do enjoy hearing what the fans have got to say.
Oh man, we want people to listen, and we love you guys.
We do.
We love hearing.
We really do. So drop us a line or drop a review. But in the meantime, stay safe, and we shall see you on the next episode.